The cabin was quiet, the hum of the engines barely noticeable, as passengers settled into their seats for what should have been a routine flight. But in first class, tension was already brewing. A confident black woman, impeccably dressed and radiating authority, was quietly reviewing documents, unaware that a shocking moment was about to unfold. The pilot, walking through the cabin with an air of impatience, suddenly made a decision that would leave everyone stunned. In a moment of unthinkable disrespect, he slapped her, not once, but sharply, right in the middle of first class. Gasps filled the air, passengers frozen in disbelief. No one could understand why this would happen, especially to someone who seemed so calm and composed. The woman didn't flinch, her eyes locked on his, calm yet intense, as if she already knew something he didn't. The flight attendants exchanged worried glances, and whispers spread like wildfire through the cabin. What neither the pilot nor the passengers realized at that moment was the full gravity of the situation. The woman he had humiliated was not just any traveler, she owned the airline. And as the plane climbed higher into the clouds, the consequences of that single impulsive act were only beginning to unfold, leaving everyone on edge, waiting for what would come next. No one knew her story at first glance. She had always carried herself with quiet confidence, a presence that seemed to demand respect without demanding attention. In the corporate world, she was known as a visionary, someone who had built an airline from the ground up, facing countless obstacles and breaking barriers at every turn. Passengers and crew had seen her before as just another executive on a flight, but this time, fate had put her directly in the path of a man who had no idea who he was dealing with. The pilot, meanwhile, paced nervously in the cockpit, replaying the incident in his mind. He hadn't expected resistance, much less the cold, unreadable stare that followed his impulsive action. Behind the scenes, the airline's operations team were already dealing with the repercussions of the confrontation. Security protocols, flight schedules, and even corporate leadership discussions were suddenly in motion, triggered by a moment that could have been avoided entirely. Passengers whispered about the clash, sharing theories and speculations, but the truth was far more complex than anyone could imagine. Questions lingered. Why had the pilot acted so recklessly? What would the CEO do next? And most importantly, how would this incident ripple through the airline she had worked so hard to build? Every second felt charged with tension, leaving the cabin on edge, as the story of power, pride, and accountability began to unfold. The cabin remained thick with tension as the plane soared above the clouds. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the CEO and the crew. Some were whispering about the shocking slap, while others speculated about the woman's authority, sensing there was more to her than met the eye. Meanwhile, the flight attendants tried to maintain composure, offering polite reassurances while exchanging glances that spoke volumes. This was no ordinary passenger conflict. Back in the cockpit, the pilot's confidence was cracking. He had prided himself on control and precision, but this incident now felt like a storm he hadn't anticipated. Reports were already beginning to circulate among the airline staff. Rumors of a confrontation in first class were spreading fast. He started questioning whether he had unknowingly crossed paths with someone whose influence reached far beyond the cabin. Meanwhile, the CEO remained calm, almost detached, as if measuring every word and action. Her mind was already racing with the implications. Company image, media fallout, and how to hold the pilot accountable without causing chaos mid-flight. At the same time, a subtle subplot was unfolding among the passengers, some of whom had business ties to the airline, others who were curious travelers. Their perspectives added layers to the conflict, each reaction revealing the stakes in a different light. The tension was building with every passing minute. Who would make the first move? And what consequences would ripple from a single moment of recklessness? By now, the atmosphere in first class was almost unbearable. Passengers were holding their breath, some pretending to read, others stealing nervous glances at the CEO and the pilot. The woman's calm demeanor only heightened the tension, each silent gesture carrying weight. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, followed the pilot as he moved through the cabin, and every subtle motion seemed to carry a warning that she was not someone to underestimate. The flight attendants were caught in a delicate balance, trying to maintain order while feeling the pressure of the unfolding drama. Every announcement over the intercom, every shuffle of trays or papers, seemed amplified in the charged silence. In the cockpit, the pilot's hands gripped the controls tighter than necessary. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios, media leaks, internal investigations, the possible collapse of his career, and yet he couldn't bring himself to leave first class. Passengers began to murmur again, noticing that something monumental was about to happen. A few had discreetly recorded videos, sensing that this incident was far from ordinary, while others quietly texted friends, speculating about who the mysterious woman could be. And then, the CEO slowly rose from her seat, her presence commanding every eye in the cabin. The air seemed to crackle with anticipation. What she would do next could change everything. Not just for the pilot, but for everyone on the plane. The moment teetered on the edge, the climax drawing near, and the tension was unbearable. Just as all eyes were fixed on the CEO, a sudden chime from the cockpit cut through the tension like a knife. The pilot froze, his confidence faltering even further. An urgent message flashed on the screen: a technical issue had been detected, something that required immediate attention. The cabin fell silent again, but now the unease was deeper. What had started as a personal conflict was now entwined with a potential safety concern. The CEO didn't flinch. She calmly reached into her bag, pulling out a tablet, and began tapping with purpose. Whispers spread through first class. Some passengers noticed she was accessing flight data, others saw her quietly issuing instructions to the crew. It became clear that she wasn't just a figurehead, she understood the inner workings of the airline in ways no one had realized. Meanwhile, the pilot's earlier mistake now seemed even more critical. Not only had he acted impulsively in first class, but his lack of awareness could have serious consequences for the flight. The tension between the two now carried an entirely new weight. Professional stakes, corporate reputation, and passenger safety were all at risk. Passengers leaned forward, sensing that the story they thought they understood was far more complex. Every second heightened the suspense. Who would act first? Could the CEO regain full control, or would the pilot's recklessness push the situation to the breaking point? The plane seemed to hold its breath as the conflict escalated, leaving everyone on edge. The CEO finally stood fully, her presence dominating the cabin. Every eye followed her as she calmly but firmly addressed the pilot. With a voice that left no room for argument, she laid out exactly what had happened and the consequences of his reckless behavior. The pilot, pale and speechless, realized in that moment that he had underestimated her completely. The tension that had gripped the cabin for nearly the entire flight seemed to crack, replaced by a mixture of awe and relief. Passengers watched as she coordinated with the flight attendants to stabilize the situation. She quickly reviewed the technical alert and gave precise instructions to the pilot, guiding him to resolve the issue efficiently. Her calm authority turned chaos into order, proving she was not only the owner of the airline but also someone who understood every aspect of its operation. The flight resumed its course smoothly, and murmurs of admiration spread through first class. Just as everyone began to breathe easier, a subtle, chilling twist emerged. A message popped up on her tablet from the airline's security team. The incident had triggered an internal investigation far beyond the flight itself, revealing potential corruption and misconduct within the airline's higher ranks, something even she had not anticipated. The CEO's eyes narrowed slightly, a new resolve forming. While the immediate conflict was resolved, it became clear that the real battle was only beginning. The cabin settled, but the story was far from over, leaving passengers and the audience on edge, wondering what would happen next. As the plane touched down smoothly, a sense of relief washed over the passengers. The tense hours in first class had tested everyone, but the CEO's calm authority had turned a volatile situation into a controlled resolution. The pilot, now fully aware of the gravity of his actions, offered a quiet apology, his pride bruised but his respect earned. It was a moment of reckoning for him, a reminder that leadership and accountability extend far beyond the cockpit. Passengers lingered in their seats for a moment longer, processing the drama they had witnessed. Some exchanged compliments about the CEO's composure, others whispered about how rare it was to see such decisive, intelligent leadership in action. Even the flight attendants, who had managed the situation with professional poise, felt a renewed appreciation for the woman who commanded respect without raising her voice.